No phone calls, no messages. Nothing but junk mail and overdue bills to keep me company. Seems nobody wants to hire a real private dick anymore. A professional like me. A guy who does the detective work nobody else wants to do. A guy who wears hats and walks around in a black and white world. I began contemplating a more profitable line of work, like politics.
We are the show you want to know. It's time to talk to you.
All right, folks, welcome to the Thursday afternoon edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN Radio Central. You can join the conversation for the next hour at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Our text line is up and running at 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. Text it like you would anybody else that appears on a screen here in the studio in real time. We try to work it into the conversation. Don't forget, the station does stream 24/7 to the TuneIn app, like thousands of other radio stations do. So that means you can take us anywhere. I love that feature. You can put it on your tablet, your smartphone, your book, whatever you want, and take us anywhere. Or tell Alexa to play WCRN. She'll do that, no questions asked. Now, don't forget, I do stream to our multiple platforms, the station's Facebook page and YouTube channel, or my social media platforms at Joe Mangi Show, M-A-N-G-I. So that would be Twitch, LinkedIn profile, Facebook, X, and yes, live to Rumble. So multiple ways to watch, multiple ways to listen. So I got to tell you something. This weekend, America gets another round of what is being marketed as righteous protests, this time under the banner of No Kings. And let me be very clear right out of the gate. Peaceful protests is an American right. It's protected. It's sacred. It is part of the very fabric of free speech. But riots are not protest. Intimidation is not speech. And mob rule certainly is not democracy. And that is exactly why today's guest matters. Adam Swart has spent years inside the machinery of modern public demonstrations. He is not speaking as an academic guessing from the sidelines. He is speaking as someone who has seen how these things are organized, funded, branded, staffed, and pushed into the media bloodstream. According to what I've been told in the background I have for today's interview, Adam says the protest game has changed. What
Your mic is cut. Joe, your mic is cut.
Sorry about that, Ted. Did the mic kicked off, right?
You're back on.
All right. Sorry about that. So anyway, look at the scale of what's coming Saturday the 28th. There are reports of more than 3,000 events planned across the country, making this one of the largest coordinated protest days in recent memory. No Kings. Now, that matters because scale changes everything. A protest of 200 people is one thing. A rolling national movement with thousands of events, heavy emotion, cameras everywhere, political activists, counter-protesters, social media amplification, and local law enforcement already under pressure is something very different. And according to Adams' de-escalation memo, the real danger is not some random spontaneous combustion. It's a pattern, a cycle. First, somebody gets in officer's face, then there is force response, then the crowd surges emotionally, then somebody else decides the rules are over, then the whole thing just spirals. Adam's central point is simple and smart. Escalation is usually a cycle, not a one-sided event. And the key is preventing the first trigger rather than pretending you can magically control the last one. So let me invite into the conversation Adam, who has very gracefully decided to join us today. So Adam, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and hopping on WCRN and my show. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Joe, and hello to the great folks of Massachusetts. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon.
Now, where are you coming to us from? What state?
Well, I split my time between various sunny parts of the country, between
Nice.
the Southwest and the Pacific Coast. So I hope the weather out in your neck of the woods is better than what it was when I was last there. But yes, it's great to be with you.
Excellent. Let's kind of get into this. What are we expecting this weekend on the Saturday, the 28th, the big rolling, do they call it a rolling protest or just a national protest?
Sure. Well, I think one of the big things is to remember, as you eloquently stated, that the right to peacefully protest, regardless of the subject of the protest, is ingrained in the First Amendment. Obviously, for the people of Massachusetts, you were the ones who gave birth to this country, right, and gave birth to the principle of freedom of expression, right? So that's a God-given right. That's a right that our founders protected. So it's very important that whenever we kind of discuss the movement, that we emphasize that first, and within that, to recognize that even if there are bad actors, and there are bad actors who attach themselves to any large movement, whether right, left, or none of the above, that a vast majority of people are protesting peacefully. And even if you despise what they're saying, it's important that you, as a citizen, but also the law enforcement and the authorities, protect their right to express themselves.
So let me ask you, because you've been inside this world for a long time. When did you create Crowds on Demand? Started
2012. So that's
2012.
almost 14 years ago at this point that I've been doing this business. So we, Crowds on Demand, have, we work nationwide. We organize peaceful, lawful demonstrations. We've secured multi-billion-dollar deals through a lot of protests. We've secured, we actually led the Hallmark Delete Facebook protest, which actually held Facebook accountable for, manipulating their algorithms and using customer data against us, dividing Americans against each other, and even allegedly causing a genocide through neglect in Myanmar. And our campaign was so effective, they changed their name to Meta shortly thereafter. They literally, a multi-trillion-dollar company, a trillion-dollar company, changed their name, right? We've secured concessions from pharma companies, insurance companies, right through public action, lawful, effective, respectful protest campaigns. So I know what I'm talking about, and I believe in the power of the First Amendment, but I think there's always no excuse for chaos and escalation in a country that affords us the right to peacefully express ourselves.
So do you care where political? I'm wondering about the political, and I know my listeners, right, Adam, are wondering, do you always book with the Democrats? Do you book with Republicans? Is it the message, or is it the political party that Crowds on Demand would cater to?
The message. We don't work for either party, I'll tell you that.
Okay.
I don't like the establishment of either the Republican or the Democratic Party. I grew up as a Democrat, and I worked with a lot of Democrat campaigns, but my views are very much in the independent side right now. So I will work with liberals on common sense liberal causes, and will work with conservatives on common sense conservative causes, never directly in opposition to one another, as you can imagine.
Right. So the common thread there is, I heard, common sense. If it's a common sense issue where the majority of Americans are like, yeah, that makes sense, like voter ID, you support voter ID?
Well, yes. I mean, I think that I support the idea of having to show your identification before you vote. I think the issue is obviously complicated. I'm not a politician, so it's not for me to kind of get into the weeds of that. But my take is that I like to be on the side of common sense, and sometimes there is a large majority of people who want something, and then a small minority of well-heeled or entrenched donors. So two examples of industries we've taken on, as I mentioned, big tech and big pharma. I mean, even people getting paid by tech companies hate big tech. So everyone hates big tech, and yet big tech owns our congressperson. everyone in Congress, right? So one misnomer about Crowds on Demand is people think Crowds on Demand is the service of the big, large interests. We're actually the service of the small and medium-sized interests. If you're Google, if you're Pfizer, you don't need to protest. There's nothing for you to protest. You own Congress. You write the laws. You own the Congress people. You have a revolving door. Crowds on Demand is actually the way, the catalyst of oftentimes creating movements, oppositional, effective, peaceful, lawful movements to kind of raise public awareness about these issues where the moneyed class have often kind of set things against the American people.
Okay, I got to ask Adam, because I know I'm wondering and listeners are wondering, where do you get the people from? How do you grab 100 or a few thousand people to show up at a square or a march on Crowd on Demand? So how do you pull these people out? Is it a social media mechanism or what?
Well, Joe, part of it is our experience of having done this for almost 14 years.
Mhm.
So we started, and I still get some flack for it now. But when I started this business in LA when I was a student at UCLA, and the people that I would staff for events were actors, right? It was the gig economy before people even called it that, right? But now we source people who are passionate about particular issues. So if it's like a PR stunt to raise awareness for a company, for example, we'll probably use actors because we want a performative element. But from the perspective of a political event or like a cause or advocacy protest, we have people who are passionate about that cause. And with all the technology available, including people who've worked with us for a long time, we have a really good list of people, and we have a good way of getting more.
Yeah, I would say so. It's a pretty effective company, right? I mean, what's the largest number of people you've ever pulled for an event?
And just before I answer that question, I think your audience would be very interested in knowing that we actually vet all of our people before coming to each event. So they'd be surprised that we actually have Zoom calls, typically, not with me, but with one of my team members before each event. Even if you've worked with us before, we interview people for two particular things. Number one, to make sure they're in line with the cause, and two, to make sure that they're in line with our principle of peaceful, respectful, articulate advocacy.
All right, I'm going to let that question hang. That's called a cliffhanger. So we'll answer that when we come back on the other side, folks. But we have to take our first break here. So segment one's over on this Thursday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. 508-871-7000. If you have a question for Adam and you'd like to join the conversation, we'll be back in 2 minutes and 10 seconds, folks.
Kohler Park is the place to play. It's still the best ballpark in AAA. Unibank fireworks every Friday. Sunset catches.
Knock that down there a little bit. All right, I'll rephrase it, reintroduce. When you come back in radio, I'll re-roll everything, Adam, and set the question up again.
You got it.
And then we take it from there. And then I have a few other questions to get into.
My
talk
pleasure.
a little bit. Say again?
My pleasure. Yeah, it's a great concept.
Yeah. So are you in Pacific, or are you down in, where are you right now? What state?
I'm in Arizona. I just don't.
I don't want to tell it on air.
I don't normally tell everybody where I am at a particular time.
No, that's fantastic. All right.
Tired of rush doctors?
We'll be back in a minute and 10 seconds. Okay.
And when you finally do, are you in and out before you know it? Did your doctor take the time to ask about your diet or exercise routine? Did they order the right lab tests? And how do you know if these are the labs you need and how to interpret them? Discover the freedom of ordering your own lab tests. Phil George, clinical biochemist and health coach, can guide you on which blood tests to order. Customized to your personal health goals, Phil's extensive training ensures that you receive the best advice on interpreting your lab results and understanding their implications. Plus, by ordering labs on your own, you'll pay far below insurance prices. Looking for an alternative to conventional medicine? Phil George can help you navigate your health journey with a personalized approach. Just email Phil at philgeorge@charter.net for a free consultation. Your health and well-being are within reach, and it starts with the right guidance. Don't miss this opportunity to take control of your health. Reach out today and embark on a path to better health with Phil George.
Whether it's the latest news, sports, and weather, Howie Carr in the afternoon, or North Star music at night, listening to Full Service Radio 830 WCRN has never been easier. Just log on to WCRNradio.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to second segment of the Thursday afternoon edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here on AM 830 WCRN Radio Central. And you can join the conversation at 508-871-7000, 508-871-7000. And don't forget our text line at 617-297-8388. And Adam from Crowds on Demand, founder of Crowds on Demand, has joined us in studio, virtual studio. If you're watching the stream, folks, you can see Adam and myself. And before the break, I asked you, what was the largest number of people you were able to rustle up for a protest or event? And am I going to be shocked?
Well, it's well into the high thousands. I'll put it that way. And let me give you a few other superlatives. So that's probably the largest. The longest running protest we had a long running protest that lasted every day. I think it was 5 or 6 days a week for 3 or 4 years, continuously.
Which one was that?
It was on a multi-billion-dollar dispute between businesses. We literally had them going for 3 to 4 years. But the other thing that I think people would be surprised, though, is people probably associate and think, oh, we're doing these events of 5,000-10,000 people all the time. That's probably a rarity just from a budgetary perspective,
Sure.
right? Your average crowd size is probably more like 50 to 100 people that we do. A lot of times clients come to us and say, I want thousands of people. And then when you actually refine what they're looking for, and obviously budgetary constraints, right? You can actually say, you can accomplish a lot with 50 to 100 people. Because if you use the people the right way and you focus your advocacy on the right kind of particular levers, then you can be quite effective with a small group of people. And by the way, you can be very ineffective with a large group of people, as Occupy Wall Street showed.
Yeah. What do they get for background or talking points when they're there as they're employed? Because we all see those clips, Adam, where the YouTuber goes out there and goes up to the protester or the person there and says, your sign says this, what's your take on that? And they can't really answer the question. Do you brief them? Do you give them talking points? Or do you just say you're being employed to stand here with a sign?
Oh, first of all, I was kind of just before the break going over a little bit of our vetting process.
Yeah.
Even before they get on scene, we talk to them about the cause, make sure that they're in support. Ideally, we want them to speak on their own behalf as to why it matters to them.
In their own words.
In an ideal world, they tell us why it matters, right? Now, of course, depending on the client and the issue, there may be certain talking points that we want to ensure that we bring up. But overall, I think the most effective forms of protest are ones where you have people who are passionate about the cause, with experience about the cause, talking about it from how it matters to them. Our job is facilitating their participation, not directing them what to do. But we do direct just to make sure that it doesn't get off track, right? Like I'm sure you've all seen these protests, right? Where there might be like a good cause or a cause that has some merit, that then somebody says something stupid and then the whole cause looks illegitimate, right? So we try to avoid like that type of problem.
Yeah, exactly. Totally unravel all the work that you just did. Let me ask you this, because you've been inside this world for a long time, 14 years, started it, what you said, as a student at UCLA. What made you decide that now is the moment to speak out publicly about how modern protests are really organized?
Well, Joe, part of it is because there is misinformation about Crowds on Demand, about my business, the business I spent my entire adult career building, right? So in one sense, like just in terms of self-interest, it's incumbent on me as the founder to go out there and set the record straight and make sure people understand we're like, people sometimes like, oh, you're engaged in riots. Like, no, we're not, obviously, right? We don't do that. We're peaceful, respectful, lawful advocates. So one thing is that. Number two, to set the record straight about how we get the people and organize the people. Like, so when you see these people, these viral YouTube videos that you referred to of some fool saying, oh, I was just paid, that I don't care about the issue. Well, that has nothing to do with us. That's like telling the CEO of Starbucks that I went and had a crappy coffee at a convenience store. It's like, well, that sounds great, but that has nothing to do with Starbucks.
Well, let me ask you this, Adam. And as the founder of the company, you've obviously put everything into this business. You built this business for your, as you said, your entire adult life, and you vet these people, interviewed them, give them the information and make sure, hey, they support this and they can articulate their support in their own words. All that sounds fantastic. How do you handle when the bad actors show up? Because maybe some of these bad actors don't even understand this is crowds on demand. They don't understand this organized protest, and they jump in. And I think you get the bad rap when these bad actors mingle or commingle with your people. What's your damage control? How do you handle that? And what do you have to say to those bad actors?
Well, one other piece of kind of misinformation is that, like, one of the big things about Crowds on Demand is we try not to be part of the noise. So we're not involved in ICE or pro-ICE, anti-ICE. We're not involved in Israel, Palestine, right? We like to take on more smaller niche issues where we're the only people talking about it, because we can have an outsized impact in that way. So we're not really putting our people, for the most part, in situations where those type of people would be involved. So first off, we avoid those situations and we try to avoid them, even while there might be some profit motive in doing it. For the safety and also just for integrity, we don't do that. So that's just one piece of information that you might find interesting. The second thing is that when there are kind of more tense type situations, right, where I know something is going to be tense, we may either hire security or pre-coordinate with law enforcement. As I said before, law enforcement are friends, because law enforcement has a sworn duty to facilitate First Amendment expression. So to the extent that we feel that someone might be trying to do something bad, we'll talk to law enforcement, and because they're our friends, right? They love peaceful protests.
Got it. Well, I got to ask you though, because this weekend, when you look at this Saturday's No King's Action, what makes this round, right, different from the usual protest cycle we have seen in recent years?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that one of the challenges, as you know from being in media, is the media landscape has changed and become more siloed, right? So, 50 years ago, you just had mainstream media. Then 15 years ago, you had mainstream media and conservative media. Now you have so many different silos of media, right? So you have the possibility of going viral within a certain group, either a group that agrees with you or a group that vociferously disagrees and is trying to delegitimize. So these clips can be kind of taken out of context, shown on social media, and be used to either delegitimize a protest movement or delegitimize the authorities, right? And it really complicates things for both protest organizers and authorities. And what the other challenge is, you have, especially when it comes to the ICE agents and other sort of law enforcement, but particularly the ICE, those guys are not trained in crowd management, right? So you have people who are kind of aggressive ICE agents who don't have the training, de-escalation training, or at least from the videos I've seen, they don't seem to. And then you have protesters who also don't seem interested in de-escalating. So this is a powder keg about to erupt, right? Because you have a protester, as you correctly said at the start of the show, you have a protester who gets up in the face of the ICE agent pepper sprays them. That that gets the protesters riled up. That gets the ICE agents riled up. We've all seen those clips, right? And this is a preventable thing. And what's critical is that both the protesters and the authorities commit to de-escalation, right? And let cooler heads prevail. And there's a way that you can protest in a way that isn't disorderly, and there's a way you can enforce order that is not aggressive and unjust.
Got it. But this particular weekend, right? We have more than reported anyway. 3,000 protests are planned nationwide. Yeah. And from your perspective, what does sheer scale do to this risk profile of events? 3,000 protesters. That's
well, of course, when you have like that level of magnitude, you are the likelihood of something happening at one event. Again, all it takes is one for either one case of either the authorities being overly aggressive or the protesters being overly escalatory to create a situation, and both could happen at the same time. You could have one situation in one city where a police officer is too aggressive, and another situation in another city where a protester is aggressive, and those both go viral on the respective sides' social media. So you have right wing saying these protesters are a menace to society, and you have left wing saying the authorities are taking a far too hard line. And whereas even if 2,998 protests go off completely without incident. So
that one.
So it just takes one, which is why it's so critical for that I'm trying to get people to listen to the idea of de-escalate. Think about de-escalating before this happens, because and let cooler heads prevail.
Adam, before we got a break, why don't you roll information about your organization, your website, or can people find out more information? How do corporations reach out to you if you want to roll some of your info?
Sure. Crowdsondemand.com. That's www.crowdsondemand.com. And you can follow me on Twitter at CEO Adam Swart. That's CEO and my name.
Adam Swart. Adam, can you stick with us, or do you have to run?
I can give you a few more minutes if you're enjoying my company that much.
And well, I am, and I think the listeners are, because I got to tell you, the idea or the image of Crowds on Demand, I think, and that's why you're here today, has been tainted, and a lot of people think you are this left-leaning organization that comes in and pays all these actors to be bad actors and cause problem. And I'm glad that, we can give you an opportunity to talk about Crowds on Demand, the motivation behind it, the mission of it. But we do got to take the mid-show break here, folks. So what we're going to do is pause for a second. Adam Swart is with us, the founder of Crowds on Demand. You can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. And don't forget our text line at 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. We'll take a break. We'll come back for the second half of the Thursday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRA.
Time now for the forecast from the Boston Independence Group Weather Center. Call Jerry Doherty today at 877-772-1776. Retirement is within reach.
I'm Chief Meteorologist Sherry Spear, and here's the latest Boston 25 weather on Radio 830 WCRN. So mild out there today with highs in the 60s. Mostly cloudy, a bit breezy, and then we've got more rain forming later this evening. So this evening and tonight, we've got about a quarter to half an inch of rain expected tomorrow. Dries out. Like after the morning commute, it actually looks decent for the afternoon, but it's going to get colder. Temperatures will be back in the 40s for Friday and 30s for Saturday. I'm Boston 25 meteorologist Sherry Spear, and you can hear Boston 25 live for the morning drive weekdays on AM 830 WCRN.
Headline news, weather, and local information central to your day on Radio Central 830 WCRN.
Are you concerned about the future of health freedom in Massachusetts? Join us for the People's Health and Freedom Forum, a powerful one-day event bringing together leading voices in health, education, and personal freedom. On Saturday, April 18th from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. in Oxford, Massachusetts, you'll hear from experts including pediatrician Dr. Larry Pilevsky, analyst John Bodwin Sr., and other physicians, educators, and advocates working to restore integrity and choice in medical decision-making. You'll learn how to find healthcare practitioners aligned with your values, navigate mandates and exemptions, understand concerns surrounding COVID and mRNA policy, and explore alternative K-12 education options and EMF safety strategies. Your ticket includes a full day of speakers, lunch, and a happy hour to connect with others who care about health freedom. This event is hosted by Health Rights MA Advocacy and proudly sponsored by WCRN Radio. To stand with us as sponsors, email hello@healthrightsma.org. To get tickets, visit healthrightsma.org. Educate, organize, unite for freedom.
All right, folks, welcome back here to the second half of the Thursday afternoon edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. Today, Adam Swart joins us as we pull back the curtain here, and we're talking about how protests are built, how they go sideways, which cities are most at risk this weekend, how both demonstrators and law enforcement can keep things from turning ugly, and why transparency may be the missing piece of this in this country. And it's serious about preserving both free speech as well as public order, because America does not need kings, but it also does not need mobs. It needs law, liberty, honesty, and of course, it needs adults in the room. And Adam, again, thank you for joining us. And I wanted to point, so you identified Minneapolis, Twin Cities, New York City, Chicago, Austin, and Los Angeles as places where de-escalation will matter most. Walk us through why we should, these cities are jumping out at you. And let me just get your microphone back on. Go ahead.
Well, the challenge is all of these cities are, one common thread in all these cities is they all have very vociferous kind of left-wing communities, right? Very passionate, right? Nothing wrong with passion, but these are cities that have where that passion has extended sometimes beyond what is lawful, right? So particularly if you looked at Minneapolis, I mean, Minneapolis historically has been this kind of calm, boring city, but in the past 6 years, it's sort of turned into a little bit crazy or of a place. Well, you've had the recent kind of incidents over the summer, right? Or more recently than that over the winter, right? And then obviously you had the riots and the aftermath of the Floyd, the George Floyd matter, right? So it feels like you have a very aggressive kind of protester base, but then you also have law enforcement that seems to be, again, the biggest culprits from the law enforcement standpoint or federal law enforcement. So let me make a actually broader point before I get into the city by city, is local law enforcement tends to have a de-escalatory mindset. So I've dealt with probably hundreds of police departments across the country in my 14 years history, right? And almost all of them are very friendly, very easy to work with. They come in, they're like, hey, we're here to make sure you to protect you just as much as we are to kind of police the activities, right? And what I have seen kind of outside of our work is when there is a protester who might be breaking the law, let's just say they're lying in the road or whatever, something that's unlawful. Well, first of all, you give them a chance to get up. You let them know what they're doing is unlawful. You got to get up, right? You warn them that what they're doing is unlawful and they're going to be arrested, right? And basically dragging them off the street, kicking and screaming is option number 5. It's not option number 1, if you see what I'm saying. Whereas it feels like when I've seen the videos of the ICE folks, it feels like escalation is option number 1, right? And that is generally, in my opinion, a bad idea when it comes to First Amendment expression, even unlawful kind of the unlawful.
I get what you're saying, and I agree to an extent, but also we've got to, and I've seen these same videos. And the police officers and law enforcement officers, and these are duly authorized federal officers. They've gone to the federal officer training, and they've either gone into ICE, DHS, DEA, FBI, whatever it is. But when you have groups who have a track record of some pretty heinous things, and they're surrounded, and to take your example of somebody laying in the road, and I grew up in the house in a police officer's home. I'm the son of a police officer. I was on Middlesex County Sheriff's Department. I'm a second generation PI. I own a very large private detective agency. I work hand in hand with the police often. They're very cautious. They're very concerned about being set up and ambushed in these situations. So if you lay down in front of police officers, Adam, I'm sorry that you have to be removed quickly. You cannot box these people in. You cannot box their vehicles in, because to them, that's not going to end well. And it's not going to end well for them, not themselves, or at least that's how they're going to plan that. So sometimes I see the protesters jumping those steps. Not always.
I don't endorse that, to be very clear. I don't endorse that. I think it's an unlawful, again, as I've said, in a country that actually affords us the right to demonstrate legally,
peacefully, yes,
then there's no excuse to do all of this stuff. So I think we're on the same page. My question is, first of all, a lot of protesters are not aware. You'd be shocked how many of them are not aware that what they're doing is unlawful. So if you've seen some of these things,
the ignorance out there is they get this. The armchair lawyers are constitutionalists, and a little bit of knowledge, Adam, can be very dangerous, right? Because they think, oh, I have freedom of speech, that it's this blanket freedom of speech. Right. That means there's no limit to it whatsoever. Well, I got news for you. There's many cases where the Supreme Court has actually said, you can't do that. That's oversteps. So, I agree with you that a lot of these protesters showing up don't understand what their actual rights are, and meaning where their right to peacefully protest ends and breaking the law and becoming dangerous begins.
That's right, Joe. And that's one of the experiences that Crowds on Demand brings to bear, is we are well aware of what we have the right to do and what we don't have the right to do. So sometimes, like I said, people sometimes are like, oh, well, Adam's arguing for protesters to be weak-willed. No, absolutely not. I say, know your rights, know what you are permitted to do. So there have been cases where, for example, we have a large protest outside a convention center, and the officer on site will say, hey, can you move across the street? And I'll say, well, respectfully, we don't have to do that. We're on a public sidewalk. We're gonna stay here, right? And if you want to run that by your lieutenant to verify that, feel free to do it. So I negotiate from a perspective of knowledge, but from a perspective of respect. So it's the same. So you're right. The problem is, Joe, a lot of these people are like, oh, well, they falsely believe that anything that isn't directly violence is permitted First Amendment expression, and that's not true. And by the way, this is part of also, Joe, why I'm a big advocate against defund the police. I'm actually the biggest advocate I want to double police funding, and I want more police officers, because you correctly talked about officers feeling like they're boxed in. The studies show, and you know this so much better than me, having been on the job, is that officers are most likely to make a rash decision when they feel outnumbered and overstretched, right? When they have the sufficient numbers and the sufficient capabilities, then they're more likely to kind of exercise calm and restraint. But when they're, like you said, they feel like that is a more concerning situation, that is more likely to become escalatory. So I actually am a big believer in increasing police funding nationwide, because I want and responsible
and well trained, for that matter. But Adam, you described three main escalation triggers. Can we talk about that for a second? The close physical confrontation, blocking access, to the point I'm making there, and disproportionate force. Which of these tends to ignite a situation faster in the real world, in the real situation here?
Well, what I've seen is when protesters get up in an officer's face, that is the biggest mistake that they can make, because, like, as you said, officers may feel they're 9 out of 10 officers may just sort of see, okay, they're swearing at me, but 1 out of 10 might see, okay, where does yelling at an officer, which is still constitutionally protected,
Sure.
go into spitting on an officer, which is not, right? And how, and could it, that's why I say keep distance, right? Let's go back to COVID. By the way, I'm a germaphobe, so I like 6 feet distance anyway. You know,
yeah.
stay 6 feet away from me. If you don't know me, stay 6 feet away from me. You know what I mean? And there's no possible excuse for a protester to get within 6 feet of an officer unless they're having a more rational dialogue conversation. But if you want to yell at the officer and tell them that you're unhappy with what they're doing, totally fine, but do it from a reasonable distance. You know, so that tends to be the trigger. And then, okay, so you think you're yelling at the officer, and then the officer feels like you spit on them. Okay, well, the officer could take you into custody, but some officers I've seen with the ICE, they're like, okay, I'm going to pepper spray you. Okay, well, that's kind of escalatory in and of itself, because pepper spray gets everywhere. It might end up hurting somebody who isn't even associated with that confrontation, right? And that
funny
creates,
sometimes on the clips.
yeah.
But it makes good. Let me ask you, could you explain the protest escalation cycle?
Well, that is what it is.
That's basically what you're talking about.
Politics, right? Think about is when you're thinking about what's happening in the Middle East. Okay, America does this, Iran does that, America does this, Iran does that. It's the same concept on a much lower scale when it comes to protest. Protesters does this, cop does that. Protester does this, cop does that, right? And each is escalatory to the point of, and if you keep on the escalation ladders, you have cops releasing tear gas and protesters running and, you know, trying to storm police stations, right? Very, very bad, and I condemn it. So if you prevent the initial catalyst, then you can prevent the escalation ladder from ever taking place.
And how does that fit into the, you know, what should you do in the first 15 minutes of a demonstration to keep things calm?
First 15 minutes, what you need to do is a protest leader should liaise with a cop leader, right? So if you're a cop, if you're a police lieutenant, whatever, find a rational person on the protester side, if you can, who you can liaise with and say, look, we're here to protect you, not to hurt you, you know, but you need to work with us to keep this within the lawful bounds. And if you're a protest leader and find a cop leader. If you feel like one of the line cops are rude, talk to the captain, talk to the lieutenant, right? The higher up you go, the more the high level officers are very aware of what the law spells out, right? They're not going to try to, police captain knows better than to try to shut down a lawful protest, right? That's never going to happen.
Absolutely.
So find that rational actor. So it's the same concept as what is needed in diplomacy, Joe. You need a rational actor from both sides who is respected by their respective crew to liaise.
We got to take our third and final break here, folks. So we're going to pause for a moment. And again, you can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. Adam Swart is in studio with us, founder of Crowds on Demand. Stick with us, back in 2 minutes, 10 seconds.
Being responsible for an aging parent or spouse can feel overwhelming. That's why there's Florence, or Floor, the AI companion designed for busy daughters, sons, and spouses who want to support their loved ones. Floor listens, talks, and remembers.
I related to you when you said a bit of a germaphobe.
Yeah.
I was okay. I never went back to shaking hands. Never enjoyed it in the first place.
Yeah, I don't like people in my face. So, like, I sympathize with the cops. Or like, just say that out of my face. I mean, if you're a normal person, like, yeah, I'd want to. Like, the thing is, with a cop, you as a cop, you want to have a certain sense of restraint where somebody could be swearing at you, acting a fool, but you've got to keep it level-headed. You know, this is a challenge. You know.
Yeah, I was working mostly doing all my shows from home. So when COVID hit, it didn't really change my life at all.
That's
You
so
know what I'm
funny.
saying?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, nothing really changes for me. And they were telling us, oh, wipe everything down. I'm like, why weren't you wiping it down before you put it in your refrigerator anyway? Shouldn't you have been doing that before COVID? So,
Yeah, wash your hands.
yeah.
Don't touch some service. Don't just don't touch a crosswalk sign, like the
Yeah.
walk button. Like seriously.
I even rinse off stuff when it comes out of the dishwasher because it has soap and residue and stuff on it.
Oh wow, good for you. Good for
Yeah,
you.
so I'm already very much like that. All right, let me we're gonna come back in about 15 seconds here.
For sponsorship details, just go to WCRNradio.com.
More live and local radio is next. Stay tuned to Radio Central, 830 WCRN.
All right, folks, welcome back to fourth final segment here on the Thursday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. Adam Swart is in a virtual studio with us. He is the founder of Crowds on Demand. He's gotten a bad rap, and I'll be honest. I thought you were. I thought that you might have been responsible for things that you weren't responsible for. I think I might have credited you with some of these bad actors, thinking you were behind it. I'll be honest with you, Adam, and I'm glad that you've had this opportunity to clarify a few things, lay out, what the mission of Crowds on Demand is, why it was founded, how you built it up, and I guess the question becomes, how often are major demonstrations truly, grassroots? How often are they heavily coordinated through money, messaging, and strategic media planning?
Well, all the big ones, anything you've ever heard of that's shaped public opinion and policy is, of course, coordinated. But I think when people talk, I'm sure you've heard the term AstroTurf. When people use these terms, grassroots and AstroTurf, grassroots equals causes I agree with. AstroTurf equals causes I disagree with. You know what I mean? Like
Okay.
it's this whole like, oh, well, everybody on my side is genuine. Everyone on the other side is paid when, okay, let's be real. It's the United States of America, capitalist country, right? We got left-wing billionaires. We got right-wing billionaires, right? And they're both, the fact that you have movements that are on both sides that are essentially funded and to some degree sculpted by wealthy interests, including corporations, is not exactly a secret, right? Now, you can kind of try to think of little data points for why, oh, well, my side's more genuine than yours. But at the end of the day, both sides have a lot of genuine sentiment. I guess the way that I explain it, Joe, is that what Crowds on Demand and what money can do is it can get attention for your cause, but ultimately your cause has to be sexy, right? So if you think about a couple of things. Think about the people who've thrown so much money into causes and candidates that are unsexy, right? Like Jeb Bush or Michael Bloomberg or Kamala Harris, right? These are people who had hundreds of millions, or in Kamala's case, I think
billion.
Was it a billion? Yeah. So you can't, and at the end of the day, if you just wrote Joe Smith and then in parentheses D, Joe Smith would have gotten more votes than Kamala Harris in the 2024 election. So the entire $1 billion was basically just a complete waste, right? So at the end of the day, I think people overstate the ability of money to actually shape opinion. What money can—
No, that's a great point. That's a great. Kamala Harris is an absolutely great point. And even if we go back to Hillary Clinton, who outspent Trump in the 2016 election, 5-1 easily. Good point on that. But because of time constraints here, I wanted to ask you about Transparency and Political Demonstrations Act.
Yes,
and this is something you're behind. Can you lay it out for listeners what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, Joe, because I'm trying to push Congress to adopt what's called the Transparency and Political Demonstrations Act. It's to basically say if you have a political advocacy event over 500 participants, right? So that's, I would consider a large protest, right? Large event. you have to disclose not only who is funding it, but who are the vendors for it, right? And I want like from top to bottom so that you can understand whether it's a labor union, a church group, a political campaign, a billionaire, a corporation, right, and all the vendors behind it, so that we can understand, because I think part of it is I'm trying to, my self-interest in this is I'm trying to destigmatize it, because I think a lot of times people are like, oh, well, paying people, we don't like that. But at the end of the day, labor unions, church groups, like there's all kinds of other groups that could be essentially incentivized activists. And I'm just trying to kind of level set and have everybody understand, hey, there's money behind everything. The question people should be asking themselves, not about that, but do they agree with the cause or do they disagree with the cause? Because all the money in the world can't make a sexy cause or make an unsexy cause sexy.
Right. And no matter how many protesters, if you don't believe in the messaging, the principle, that it doesn't matter how many people show up to that, right? That you're not going to believe it. You're not going to vote that way. You know, you can't make that happen, I guess, is the bottom line on that. This No Kings, are you participating in this? Are you coordinated? Do you have anything to do with it? And is it going to do anything? I mean, does the No Kings thing, it makes me laugh when they talk about certain things and then they say, oh, I'm going to leave America or go live. Oh, we're a country that actually has a king. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's almost as if they're not even self-aware of the stupidity behind the No Kings rally.
Well, I guess there's two questions there. As I said earlier in the broadcast, we try to focus on more niche, nuanced issues. So like, it's not that we wouldn't work on a Democrat or Republican kind of side on where there's common sense, but there's already plenty of people for and plenty of people against. So I'd rather not involve myself in that. I'd rather focus on something that isn't getting enough attention.
Do you know who is behind it? Who organized this?
Well, there are a ton of groups backed by a ton of people, but I will say I believe that the people who are out there are genuine in their support of it. You did ask me an analytical question of, sure, is this going to work? I've been a skeptic of it. I'm sure if you've seen other kind of media I've done, I've been kind of a skeptic of doing this. It's like insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So yeah. I think to some extent, No Kings is an example of that phenomenon of, okay, we're going to keep using the same talking points kind of against Trump and hope it works. The real test to me of the Democrats' strategy or the Trump opposition strategy is, are you going to be able to do a couple things? Are you going to be able to, number one, turn out your people, which this is from an electoral perspective, but in the second perspective, are you going to be able to make yourself just unodious enough so that the anti-Trump MAGA folks, the Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene wing, is basically like, I'm either going to vote for Democrat as a protest vote or I'm not voting at all, right? Because that is the biggest threat to the Republican Party, is the kind of more, whatever you want to call them, I don't have a dog in this fight, but the isolationist, the Tucker Carlson wing of the Republican Party, basically either sitting out or in some cases actually voting Democrat as a protest vote. Democrats are often their worst enemy because a lot of those people might say, oh, I really don't like what Trump is doing in Iran or, whatever, but I really hate the Democrats more. So I think the Democrats, in a way, should try to make themselves like as least odious as possible, and so that they can get a lot of the sort of people who are disillusioned with Trump at the moment.
Got it. So let me ask you this bottom line for this Saturday, Adam. If local officials and law enforcement organizers and ordinary citizens each did one thing right, what would give these events the best chance to stay peaceful and not turn into another national spectacle?
The number one thing that I would advise both to do is develop a red phone. The red phone between the Kremlin
got it.
the White House. Do the same thing with each protester. I want a protest organizer and I want someone on the police side, both of whom are respected, to have that red phone, to be in touch, to try to keep things civil, lawful, and orderly.
Hey, Adam, we have a caller. Franklin wants to jump in. Is that okay? Franklin, what say you?
Oh, hi, Joe. I'm curious why you're even speaking to this bareheaded guy, but I am excited to see your fedora is back. Thank you very much. I love that fedora with the black stripe on the gray. It's a fantastic look, but not sure what's happening with barehead.
Great, we're short on time. What's your question?
Yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah, I guess my question is why would you talk to someone bareheaded, not even fedora?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry about that. Yeah, it wasn't focused. Adam, I'm sorry. You know.
Oh, bareheaded is no.
Yeah,
hat?
you don't have a hat on or fedora like myself. That's not an insult. Like you're an idiot or something. It just means you're literally not wearing a hat.
I was wondering. I was like, does my head look like a bear? I was like, oh, bareheaded, like no hat.
You look marvelous.
Yeah, you look marvelous. Don't worry about that.
Well, thank you, Franklin, and I'll wear a hat next time I come on if you want.
I'll send you one. A good fedora. Rock a fedora. Or do you want a baseball cap?
Yeah. I'll wear a red. I have a Red Sox cap somewhere for.
There you go. All right, man. All right. So the bottom line on this is I love your analogy. The red phone. Keep communications open. The highest ranking officer, I guess, on the scene should look for the whatever the alpha protester is.
That's right.
And make that connection, and then make sure everybody understands. Because I got to tell you something. You said, "Oh, call your lieutenant, call the captain," because they'll know. And that's so frustrating when I see these clips and videos because I watch a lot of these auditors. You know what I'm talking about, the First Amendment auditors.
Yeah.
And the same thing, they'll say the police officer, "No, you can ask me, thank you very much, but no, I'm going to stay here." But thank you. I totally lost my train of thought on that.
You were saying about the red phone. The
red phone. Keep the command. Oh, so that's you say, "Oh, get the lieutenant, get the captain." My question always with those, Adam, when I see them is, why doesn't the patrolman or the sergeant know that already? To me, they shouldn't be out there on the beat responding to an auditor standing outside of a bank or something. If they don't already understand, you can't tell somebody they got to disperse in a lawful protest.
Yeah, exactly. They should know that. And most in big cities they do, but in smaller cities I've found that the patrolmen are less likely to know that because they don't have as much experience. If you go to New York, Boston, Chicago, the police know that very well. It's the patrolmen. It's if you go to a smaller town, suburban town, those guys aren't so used to it. Those guys are likely.
Got it. Roll real quick your website again. We're against the clock. Adam, I want to thank you so much for taking time out, joining me here, and you're welcome back in the future anytime. Where do people go?
Crowdsondemand.com.
Crowdsondemand.com. There you go, Adam. Again, thank you so much for taking time out. That's going to wrap up today's edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. Not there tomorrow. The Carr Brothers will be in. So have a fantastic week, folks. Let's wrap it up for you. Go out.